Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Public Voices by NEOGOV. I'm your host, Nicole, with my co host, Doug. Today is a special two-part episode about leadership, and we're joined by three of our colleagues that have over 80 years of combined experience in HR, city management, and law enforcement.
Yeah. So before we jump in, we have a quick thank you to our sponsor, NeoGov, for, as always, making this show possible. So with that, are we ready to get started?
Let's do it. So let's go around the table. If each of you could tell us who you are, where you've been, and what brought you to this conversation today.
Sure. So my name is Pamela Benjamin, and I am a retired assistant city manager for the city of Columbia, South Carolina. And prior to my role as assistant city manager, I was chief of staff for a city manager and HR director for several years. And in addition, I have about 15 additional years in state government as a human resources professional and did everything from talent acquisition to benefits administration to employee relations to dog catcher to crisis manager, all the things that happen in an HR shop. So glad to be here with everybody.
Welcome.
So my name is Bob Weck. Thank you for the invite. Looking forward to today's podcast. I spent 31 years with the Summit Police Department. It's northern New Jersey, about 45 minutes outside New York City. The last 10 as chief. And then upon retirement, I went to a private all-girls school as director of security and worked there for a while. And I recently came over to Power DMS as one of the executive advisors. When I became chief, one of the first things I did was put in policy. So I'm really happy to be here and be able to work with other departments and agencies, to bring them up to speed with today's technology.
And I'm Evan Kunert. I'm glad to be here. Happy to be here with everybody. Retired out of Kingman, Arizona Police Department after 23 years of service. Worked my way from the ranks, from the bottom all the way to deputy chief. I was in charge of professional standards, which was a bureau that I had put together. It was a function that the department was lacking at the time. So it's just like Bob started with policies, ripped up the old manual and put it back together, became accredited, and then found issues that existed in the department, and subsequently spent the last 6 years of my career addressing them. One of the biggest ones would be officer wellness and leadership gaps. And so it was a rewarding experience, and it was time to pass the torch to somebody else after laying a good path. But I appreciate the opportunity to have conversations like this to keep the experience valid and hopefully share some success stories along the way.
It's exciting. And we've got so many people from so many different places here and so much experience. This is going to be a fun one, I think. So let's get into it. And we'll start off with our questions. Here we go, rapid fire. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's talk about pressure and communication. All of you in your careers have seen so many different things, whether it's been in city management or in policing. We still deal with so many different types of pressures, and even though they're different because of the type of work, the pressure is very real, and communication is a really integral part of it. So tell me about something, like a time you remember, or just in general terms, when something goes wrong and everybody's watching, because things just happen in public government issues, right? How do you react, and what's good leadership look like in that moment? And I'll start. Actually, I'll start with you, Evan, if you want to kind of dive in on this one a little bit. When we talk about all those issues, what's that look like to you?
Sure. So the first thing to keep in mind is that a critical incident can happen at any time, and it's not like it can be something planned. So preparation for the ceiling to crash is key in leadership. So there's an old commercial, an old cliche: "Don't ever let them see you sweat." Well, that's true. So one of the keys to good communication is basically to keep your focus and to be humble and be compassionate to whatever the situation is, but also to not falter or give undue space to whatever that critical incident may be at the time. So, for example, I had a sister agency that had a national attention type emergency with a child that had been kidnapped, and the chief there, I saw him age before my very eyes, but he did keep it together very well. And in the end, it didn't have a happy ending, but nonetheless, there was no incident, or I'm sorry, there was no false information. It was true and it was real time, and that was critical to keeping the media appeased. So fortunately, I don't have a really national spotlight incident that I can reflect on my agency, but that didn't mean that it could never happen. So training, constant conversations with your administrative staff and your PIOs to us was key.
Pam, from your perspective, like got a different perspective on things because of your roles. So what's that look like in terms of pressure and communication?
Yeah, so nothing goes more wrong than a natural disaster. And so back in October of 2015, the city of Columbia had a 1,000-year flood, and it was um, it was an event that changed all of us that lived in the city of Columbia, and it definitely affected us as city leadership because everybody was looking at us for guidance and trying to figure out what was going on and what we're going to do. And so, in the face of that, our city manager did an amazing job of bringing the team together to try and handle all of the challenges we faced during that natural disaster. And in addition to coordinating with outside resources, the National Guard, the federal government, all while keeping council informed and, you know, keeping them comfortable with what was happening. And what she did was really, first of all, made sure she was very transparent as she could be, especially with the team. And she leaned in on us for the leadership we provided. So we had an emergency management person, we have a police chief, we have a fire chief, and she knew that throughout our careers, we had been preparing for this in a way. I mean, you're never prepared for a natural disaster, but she knew that the small things that we had done so well, they compounded on each other and made us prepared for this big, natural disaster. And so she really let us be us, and she really leaned in on her team, and she didn't try to carry it all herself, which I think great leaders um, prepare their staffs for things, and then they know how to lean in on their staff when they need them. And so I think that was the key to dealing with that particular situation. And when something goes wrong, you are transparent. If you mess up, you say you messed up, and you also let people be able to shine. You're not taking the credit. I mean, whenever we had press conferences, she would let each individual who had something pertinent to say, she'd give them the mic and she'd let them speak from their chair and from their expertise. And it wasn't her show, it was about the team. And so I think that those things, being transparent and using your team, letting them shine, um, and letting them use their skills and abilities is what worked well for us during that natural disaster.
That's great. Yeah. And Bob, you've obviously led teams as well too. So kind of taking what Pam said and building on that from your own perspectives, thoughts on good leadership and how that looks during crisis.
Yeah, so I'm going to take it from two different directions. From the beginning of my career, I think my first motor vehicle accident, I pulled up and it was pretty bad. And I was thinking, someone should really call a cop. This is bad. And then I realized everyone was looking at me and that I was there. And I was the presence that was coming in to help. So I had to remember, my main thing to remember was remain calm, because people are going to take cues from a leader. If you're kind of like becoming emotional or really not reacting in a calm manner, they're gonna cue off that, and then they're gonna start acting that way. And all the way to the end of my career as chief, unfortunately, we had lost an officer in a motor vehicle accident. So it wasn't just my department that was looking at me; it was the entire city, county, and even to some degree the state. So there were times I went in my office, shut the door, broke down, and then I had to go back out and like stay strong because again, I think the biggest thing also is you have to communicate clearly because the minute that they would see myself and the other captains faltering and really not having answers, and we're not going to have all the answers, especially in something like that, because there were so many questions, but it was a very large funeral and wake. And it's amazing. The story about remaining calm is the whole department obviously went to the wake and we were there for the family. And Matt's wife was pregnant. I think she did a better job than all of us. She was amazing. She was a perfect example of remaining calm, cool headed, and just was a rock. We thought we were going to be her rock. She was our rock. So that was a big thing for me. As when something goes wrong, and unfortunately that's a pretty big, an emotional wrong. But working together with your team and letting them do. I didn't have to touch everything. The traffic lieutenant took care of what he was supposed to take care of. Patrol lieutenants took care of their rank and file, making sure they were, all there, their dress blues and everything. And that's, as a good leader, if you put that in place before, because like it was mentioned, Evan had mentioned, you never know when it's going to happen. It just, in our world, it just happens and you have to go. And Murphy always comes along for the ride, right? What can go wrong will go wrong and you have to adapt. But I think the key things for good leadership when things go wrong is you have to stay visibly calm, take ownership early, facts before react. An old time chief told me that, kid, when you're chief, get the facts as much as you can before you react. And that served me well more than once. Communication is everything. And we talk about that all the time with our various platforms, the Power DMS is communication is key in anything, whether it's a personal relationship or a business relationship, and consistently. And so that's where you want to get that information out, and you have to protect the team. If you like Pam had mentioned, if you make a mistake, own it. Be humble, and they'll see that, and that'll carry you far. So I think in all our careers, things have gone wrong, and we just have to know how to react because everyone's watching.
Yeah, and I'd like to reiterate, I think those are all really great examples of how to react in crises, but employees are watching us every day, all day. And I 100% agree that owning your mistakes is huge because when you can own your small mistakes, not in a crisis, there is a lot of trust and ability to look up to people for guidance in those moments of crisis or in those moments of high stress. And so I'm 100% a leader that even in the small moments, I'm like, oop, I made a mistake. I overpromised something. Let me figure out how to fix that. Because again, everyone's always watching.
Yeah. And you always take it for the team. You never, maybe somebody screwed up and you're like, we screw, I take ownership of it. You never throw one of your employees under the bus and, point the finger at them. You own it. It was our mistake. And then you figure out how not for that not to happen again. But, you take ownership, you take it for the team. And I know that I learned that a lot from my city manager. She would never say Pam made a mistake. She'd say, it's my mistake. I'm owning it, and then we're gonna do things to make sure this doesn't happen again.
And also, I think as leaders, we have to put our egos aside because when we're the boss, sometimes we think, all right, we have all the answers, and we clearly don't. And I think a good leader in a time of crisis will step back, and maybe the traffic lieutenant really knows more than I do about traffic, right? I have to put my ego aside and let him or her step up and lead. And I think a good leader does that. They have to put their ego aside.
Yeah, absolutely. So question number two, or it wasn't rapid fire, but for each of you. So the next question is on accountability and psychological safety. How do you, maintain like high standards while you're creating an environment where people feel safe to speak up and give ideas or say they made a mistake? What are some key elements that you've worked on to help create that in your workspace?
I'll jump on that first. So
Evan, do you want to
the
go first? Yeah.
yeah, thank you. I think the high bar or the bar, wherever it's set, is set immediately as soon as that leader becomes a leader within that organization, right? And so to ebb and flow from that can be, detrimental to a career, or it could be difficult to gain back once it's lost, or maybe when it's gone, it's just gone. So relenting from that high bar, discredit and credibility loss can be, uh, damaging overall to the mission of the organization as well as the leadership in general, not just to that person, but also to the rank and files down below. So one of the key elements is creating that open door policy. And don't let it be cliche. It needs to be a practice that can be seen and felt throughout the organization. And it needs to be somewhat of a safe space where the opinions matter of whomever has come through that door and listened to. So it's a hard thing to do, listen, right, versus just hear. It's a practice skill, but it's critical in any organization, in any rank, to the credibility of that leader. And then what that leader does with that information is also key. So, okay, I've heard the concern or the idea, and now what am I going to do with it? So it's the reaction that follows that is also part of that process. So respecting of the opinions, it's still got to be reasonable. It can't be a no holds bar action item, but I'll give an example. The moment we become a leader is the moment that we start training our replacement. So that is how you're going to start your succession plan within the organization, and that's how you find out who is going to be the true leader once you leave. And so fostering those ideas and encouraging those ideas along the way, then that gives you a sense of peace with regards to when it's time for you to leave, that it's in good hands and hopefully in a better place than when it was when you started.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like the idea or the concept of the open door policy. And in my organization, when leaders would come and say, my employees never come talk to me. I have an open door policy, but I never talk to them. I think that's a sign of psychological safety if your employees are not coming through your door, right? You can say you have an open door policy all you want, but if you haven't created an environment where people feel safe to talk to you, they're not going to walk in your office and share a concern or share an idea. So it's a good measure of how your work group is and where they're at with that psychological safety. Because if they're not coming to talk to you, there's work to be done for sure.
Yeah, I'd love
Um,
to. Oh, I'm sorry, Nicole. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Okay. So I'd love to build on that. So I always had an open door policy as long as it didn't have anything to do with work where they had to come up, like if a sergeant came in. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to go and visit, right? So they were not coming into my domain. I was going into theirs, which obviously put them at ease. And I would ask them questions because a lot of times if you're in a room with a lot of the rank and file, the leader will speak first, and then you'll have a lot of yes people. That's a great idea, and they don't sometimes feel that they can speak up because it might be against what the leader said. So whenever we did have admin meetings, I would always have everybody else speak first because they didn't know what my position on that matter was, and they had to speak what was on their mind, which I always thought kind of got that good, honest flowing going. And the other thing is I would always ask, what did I miss? Like, I don't know everything. What did I miss? What questions should I have asked? And then my people eventually started saying, you know what? He wants open communication. He wants my opinion, which I do because teamwork does make, teamwork makes the dream work. I'm a big fan of that because like Evan had said, you're kind of getting your replacement ready. So if I'm out, I might be on vacation and something happens. I need the next 1, 2, 3 people to step up and take control. So we have to work on that. But I always think communication is going to foster that honest discussion because you really want to make sure that they're giving their honest opinion so you can get it right. or as right as it can be.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Pam, what are your thoughts on accountability and psychological safety?
Yeah, I love what Evan and Bob said. I think, people often say they have an open door policy, but that doesn't mean literally your door is open, right? And that, no one wants to come in your door, but it is open. So it really means that, like Bob said, you meet people where they are, you go to them and you ask, you have an environment where people feel comfortable giving feedback. And so I love the idea he has because I would do it often as well. Is when we had a meeting, I'd ask people, "What do you think about this situation?" or "What would you do to solve this problem?" Or, "How can you contribute?" And it wasn't about me because leadership isn't about you. Leadership is about how you are, like Evan said and Bob said, you're planning your successor. It's about how you're making people successful. It's not about you at all. And if you go into leadership because you have this big ego or it's about you, you're often one of the worst leaders there there are. I laugh all the time when I have these people who are dying to be supervisors. I know that that's probably not the person that needs to be a supervisor because it's a very humbling role. You need to really not be there for yourself. You need to be there for others. And I think if people see that you're there for them, you're supportive of them, and it's not about you, it's about them and it's about the team, it's about the organization, then they're more likely to have that psychological safety and they follow your lead. They see what you do. They see how you react to things when they go wrong or when they make mistakes or if you shut them down in a meeting. Those little things give people an indication of whether they are safe in a work environment.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, we love to do like quotes on this podcast. It's like a thing for us. So I can think of one, and Nicole's already laughing because she knows something's coming. So there's a quote, and actually it's from a Marvel movie of all places, right? And it's this like, with great power comes great
Great
responsibility.
responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, see, you all know the quote already. So
Yeah.
as leaders, nobody forced you to become a leader. Nobody told you you had to go up through the ranks and do what you did. But when you took on that role, whatever it happened to be, and throughout the roles through your career progression, there's this level of accountability and responsibility that falls upon you. And not only to lead the organizations and drive the mission of whatever place you're leading, but also to look internally as to what that looks like with how people within the organization are just doing. And because we all work with the human side of things, that's what we do. We work with different people with different backgrounds, with different ideas and experiences. And because of the high pressure things that we do, that can create burnout. It can have people can become very disassociated with the work. We've seen that in the workplace these days with people just not being engaged at work. And so our responsibility is to really look within our organizations and watch to make sure that when we have really good performers, how do we turn that tide to make sure that we keep those people engaged and feel like they're a part of something, and what's that look like? And furthermore, because the very first question we talked about today, we talked about really high pressure situations. If you want to turn that mirror on you and say, I've faced this and I've dealt with those kinds of things, and here's how I approached it, and here's how I got through it. So you can look at it through a couple of different ways. But with all the experience between the three of you, curious about how you deal with retention and readiness and burnout and those types of issues. And Bob, I'd like to start with you on this one a little bit.
Yeah, some of the things with burnout, some of the signs that I would look for in myself and with my people is, am I or are they not being curious? Are they all of a sudden not asking questions where in the past they would ask questions, why, where, how, things like that, and that would start me to think, are they or am I becoming disengaged from the department? Um, did I have shorter patience? Was I kind of snapping a little bit when I really shouldn't, on maybe something that was really minor, but I was making a little bigger out of something, or a lieutenant or captain was making something, and they brought it to me, and I was like, is that really like the big picture? Like that what we're really coming down on this officer or an initiative or something like that? Or we'd be in these meetings and they were there, but they just weren't engaging. They were just like a ghost of themselves. They were just sitting there, and the silence actually stood out more than anything else, because if that captain or lieutenant or sergeant was always asking those questions and then all of a sudden just was totally disengaged, my mind's thinking, I need to have a conversation. And it wouldn't be in my office. I would always say, hey, Lieutenant, let's take a walk uptown. Because coming into the principal's office, right? Everyone's watching, and the door closed. Uh-oh, what's going on? Is he in trouble? Is she in trouble? So I always went for a walk, a natural, you're outdoors. It just kind of brought the stress level down for everyone. And then I'd always also see that they were kind of isolating themselves and they weren't leaning on their peers or mentors. They weren't coming to me saying, you've been, I was very lucky. I led every department in our, or every department within our department. So I was traffic, I was DB, community policing, patrol. So I had the knowledge of those. And then all of a sudden they weren't coming and saying, hey, when you had this happen, how did you handle it? And then we would kind of spitball or whatever. So burnout is there, and you have to look for it sometimes. Sometimes you'll see it a lot later than you should have. And the small things then can become big things. So it's there, and we need to check on each other.
Yeah, I think what I heard a lot from you, Bob, about what I tried to do was just know your people, like really know them and their personalities and how they work and how they like to work, and knowing them helped you be more aware of those signs. Because like you said, Bob, if they typically would ask questions and then all of a sudden they weren't, that was a signal that, oh, I got to check in because something's going on with that person. And so I feel like the best leaders know their people and know to be aware of those signs. Because if you have a really high performer, they're probably not going to come to you and say, I'm overworked, I'm overburdened, I got too much on my plate. They're not going to be those people that do that. And so you really got to check in, you really got to be aware, you really got to be, hyper vigilant about, you know, the signs that you see that they exhibit, and to really realize that. And then have some honest conversation. I love the way you said you took a walk and you got out of the space in order to be able to talk to them about that particular issue. And I would do that too. Let's go get a coffee. Let's get away and have some conversations. And then they would, tell me, yeah, I got a little bit too much, and you know, they don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to, maybe um disappoint the team, and so they keep on taking on those tasks and responsibilities, and it's complete burnout, or they start making mistakes that they typically wouldn't make, and then there's some indication that there's something you need to check in with them on.
I think that's a great point, Pam. And it's likely that the high performers know they're a high performer or have been told as much. So it's true. It's less likely that they're going to announce the fact, hey, I'm having some issues, whatever those issues may be, because that's their reputation at this point, and it can be, in their mind, damaging. So as a supervisor, I lean towards data, because as a police organization, for example, we are data heavy on everything. So over time, you can discover trends, and when they ebb and flow, and you see a spike within regards to a performer's data, for example, then that's a moment to maybe examine, and you could discover concerns as a good supervisor, or maybe that points to, uh, outside of the data, a personal behavior that's changed along the way. And then you got the other things such as a parent's attendance, they start being sloppy or late. Those things tend to be obvious, especially in your high performers that display those, attributes before. And then, of course, even more egregious things such as defiance, and then other, behaviors where it becomes very clear for an action item for that supervisor to take, take a closer look at what's going on in this person's life. So I've got a great example. And I'm going back quite a ways when I was a police sergeant, and I had a very excitable person that worked on my team, and it was great. It was great for morale, kept everybody motivated, and initially the stats stood on their own, and it was standard by others to live by. So I started. I can't remember exactly what it was that piqued my interest, but this particular officer had 140 traffic stops, more than a motor officer in a single month, and I thought that was great. But I also recognized that there was nothing else that went with it. There were no arrests, no citations, and I thought that's impossible. What are the odds that we've had nothing but 140 perfect traffic stops? So that created a conversation. How did this happen? That you had 140 perfect traffic stops where nothing came out of it. And that actually opened a page in a book that was a deep personal issue for this particular person. So they knew they had to be a high performer. So they were doing these traffic stops, but that personal engagement to dig a little further into these stops was an avoidance. And so we were fortunate to be ahead of that issue as an organization before it spiraled into something deeper. And so to me, that's my personal example with data. A good supervisor, if they're looking at the data every month or on a trend basis, can discover issues that aren't outward.
Yeah, absolutely. A few years ago, I went to an HR conference and attended a breakout session on burnout. And as the speaker was kind of listing all of the symptoms and what's going on when people have burnout, I had this aha moment and I was like, oh, that's me. She's describing me. I absolutely have, like, check, check, check. I have all of those things. And it was really interesting experiencing that because it took me several years to get out of it. And it was several years of being a high performer, but being extremely irritable internally. I never let my team see that, but everyone frustrated me. Every task frustrated me. All of the work felt pointless and stupid, honestly. And so it was really a struggle because when you're kind of at the top, it's really a lonely place to be because other people don't necessarily want to own that or say that they have that burnout. And I think it's super easy to recognize it in other people, but it's hard to recognize it in ourselves. And when I finally decided to quit and leave the organization, it was our city manager's like second week, and it was a big deal for a director to leave. And I really respected her because she tried to talk me out of it and she tried to get me to stay. And she's like, whatever you need, I'll make it work. And so we talked through that. And at the end of it, she said, so what I'm hearing is you need to leave for you. And I said, yes, I need to go. And I really, really respected that she respected my decision to leave and didn't try to talk me out of it, because I've seen leaders try to talk employees out of things and it has not gone well. And I think as leaders, it's so important to recognize that in people, but it's also important to respect their decision to leave, because that's a very hard decision for people, especially when they're long-term employees or very loyal employees. That that's a hard decision, and we need to encourage them and support them on their way out. So that's my experience with burnout.
Yeah, I think it's important too, Nicole, to mention that as leaders, we've all seen quality people leave our organizations. And instead of being angry or dissatisfied with them leaving, I always took the approach, and I had a chief that did the same thing before me. That was like, we hate to see you go, but we're here to support you, and we just appreciate what you've done for us. And anything you need in the future, first, you've always got a home here. But go and grow and do the things. Know that we're rooting, we're in your corner, and to me, that says a lot about the culture of your organization versus the if you want to go, you're just leaving us behind kind of attitude, which just never really that says deeper things. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that vulnerability in
Yeah.
sharing that.
Thanks for joining another episode of Public Voices. For our listeners, if this sparked conversation for you, please share with your colleagues or your friends. And if there's any topics that you would like us to cover or perspectives that you want to hear about, please let us know.
Yeah, you can always DM Nicole or me on LinkedIn. we're certainly open to that. If you have an idea or a topic or something that you want to talk about, or maybe your own takeaway, or maybe your own favorite quote that we could use on one of our future episodes, we would love to hear from you and start that conversation up. And finally, a huge shout out to all of our friends and our sponsor at NEOGOV, which helps government HR and public safety agencies work smarter with AI automation and configuration. And this week, we're actually filming from NEOGOV here in Utah, beautiful, lovely Utah. So you can learn more at neogov.com. We will see you next week. We appreciate you, and take care of one another.